All right. Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. I see we have quite a good turnout, which is really exciting. This is Hot Topics. Very excited about this. This is only our second call on this particular call, so I'm really excited about this. Today I have Steve Horswood with us. He is a project management professional with 40 years of experience developing, deploying, and evaluating enterprise resource planning systems aimed at improving business operations. He has spent the majority of his career working with international organizations across 6 continents, helping them identify inefficiencies in their business systems and providing recommendations for process and system improvements. Steve is currently the president and CEO of Marin Consulting, a boutique firm that specializes in software selection and implementation. So good morning, Steve. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, they're very exciting. This is very cool, very near and dear to my heart, especially at our college. We do have a large international student base, and we also have a lot of students who are interested in international business and travel. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we're going to kind of jump into our topic today.
Yeah, certainly. So, as you said, I've been working for a lot of years on international implementation. So it's really working. It's typically U.S.-based operations or U.S.-based companies that have operations around the globe. So as a result, it's English is a common language across that because the headquarters are typically in the U.S. You're not always going to find that. And so one of the things that I try to do when I'm dealing internationally is make sure I understand the culture that I'm going into. What are some of the basic do's and don'ts, some pleasantries, just to, kind of remind myself that when I go there, I'm the foreigner and not take things for granted. So I have spent a lot of years implementing software in a lot of different places, dealt with a lot of different cultural differences that, without taking some time to really understand, you think that somebody is being resistive to the changes when it's really just the delivery. As opposed to them being receptive. And so just understanding those nuances really help you be more successful in those engagements, because people generally appreciate the fact that you go to a little extra care, kind of learn the local system, the local customs, and even a little bit of the language. And I'll go into that a little more in detail, but it's just been kind of doing in many cases the same thing in different countries, different cultures, different continents, and the approach is always different for each one, even though the end result may be the same. And so being able to kind of grasp the cultural significance and the geopolitical significance of where you're at makes a huge difference in whether you're going to be successful or not.
That's really cool. So because you do travel internationally for business and pleasure. And so, where all have you been? Or actually, probably better question, where have you not been?
So I've been to China and walked the Great Wall there. I've been to Russia and got to see the Fabergé Egg Museum in St. Petersburg. Went on a safari in South Africa. Lived and worked in New Zealand, lived and worked in Europe, spent a lot of time in Australia. That's probably, in South America. I've spent the last 6 years working in South America. Mm-hmm. And now I'm kind of finished that up, and now I'm working in Europe again. So, I've just got to see quite a number of things, both from a pleasure trip and business. And I try to employ the same practices, regardless of whether it's there for business or pleasure. It just makes that experience so much better when the people that you're visiting know that you've gone to you've gone that extra mile to try to kind of understand the local flavor.
Okay. Um, do you have like a favorite or, place you definitely go back to?
I think New Zealand is just far and away the most spectacular place that I've ever been to. Had such a great experience there, and the people I traveled with were just top notch. So it just really made that experience so much better. But it's a beautiful country, great people.
Yeah, no. For those on the call, Steve is actually my father. So I've shared that in my class a couple times. He's my mentor and my dad. And I actually traveled with him. Him and I lived in New Zealand together when I was, 17, I think.
Yeah, your fresh senior year.
Yeah, it was crazy. So yeah, my dad and I got to live over there for a while. But this is why I actually have a lot of respect for this man. He has not only been my father, but my mentor, and has a lot of really cool things to share with us. So let's kind of dive into this topic about, I love how you labeled it the ugly American. Kind of what does that mean, and where did you come up with that?
So it's really the idea of entitlement. So Americans, for a whole host of reasons, have a tendency to, wherever they go, they think that people are going to cater to them. They get annoyed when they're in Germany and all the signs are in German. They, they don't appreciate that, even though the vast majority of people outside of English speaking countries actually speak English, but it's because and again, it's not really all Americans' fault, because our education system doesn't put that focus on learning a second language like they do around the other parts of the world. Most of the places I visit, they speak English fluently, even though that's not their native language, but they learn it from first grade. And so it's just a part of what they do, because the world is getting smaller every year. It's just getting smaller and smaller. And so you are forced, whether you like it or not, to deal and interact with people from different cultures, different countries, different languages. And it just happens that because of the English speaking countries, America, England, uh, kind of dominated the world early on, as the Industrial Revolution took hold, that they were kind of forced to speak English just so that they could work internationally. And then also, even in Europe, the countries are small, they all speak a different language. And so their common language is English when they're crossing borders. It just makes it easier. I worked for an organization, a US based organization, when I lived in Germany. And they had a requirement that at a certain level in the organization, you had to be fluent in English, because they had operations across Europe and then also in the US. So as a result, Americans just assume everybody speaks English. And I mean, there's one little story that kind of epitomizes the ugly American or the entitled American. Uh, my wife and I were in Germany, and we were at a Christmas mart, and it's one of these like a really upscale craft fair, and it's decked out with really nice. Everybody has their nice little carriages that they sell their wares, and everything's decorated, and it's just really great Christmas festive vibe. And my wife happened to hear a couple, an American couple, where they were struggling with something. And so she said, "Hey, why don't we go help them?" I knew the language a little bit, and I could probably help them. And as we're walking up to them, we hear the woman say, "I just can't believe this. Nobody's speaking English. All the signs are in German. I can't believe this. How are we supposed to know what we're doing?" And I just turned around and said, "Nope." I did not want to be associated with it. They forget that you're not in America. And another thing I learned, and this is just kind of cultural awareness, when I was in New Zealand, and I don't know if you had this experience yourself, everybody I met, the 6 months I was there, everybody I met, first thing they'd said was, "Are you Canadian?" And I
Oh,
always thought that was really odd. Why would they think I don't think I sound like a Canadian?
no.
Well, it took me several months, and I finally realized that New Zealand is like the redheaded stepchild of Australia. So anytime they travel, anytime the New Zealanders travel outside of their Asia Pac region, people say, "Oh, are you Australian?"
Oh,
Just the language there, if you spend enough time there, you can tell the difference in the accents.
yeah.
But for those that don't have that exposure, they just assume everybody's from Australia if they sound like that. So New Zealanders are very sensitive to that.
Yes.
So they figure that if I ask an American if they're Canadian, they just shrug it off and say, "No, I'm American." But if you're Canadian, boy, thanks for not just assuming I'm an American.
Okay.
So, it's that little nuance that is important to these cultures. They don't want to be minimized or thrown into this larger pot because of the region. Um, so, it's just part of kind of the message I want to get to is as you're traveling, you're you need to be a little prepared. You need to do a little research, and it goes a long way in how you are perceived, how you're received. Um, so if you think about it, if you have foreigners coming to your American operations in a meeting, you expect to conduct your meetings in English and you expect them to understand English.
Right.
But by the same token, when the Americans go to Japan, they expect to have those meetings conducted in English.
Well, okay.
So, and the good news is that most of them do speak English and they're able to accommodate that. But it's that sense of entitlement that they just assume that everybody will cater to your requirement and your lack of, additional language skills. And again, it's not really the fault of people of Americans because we just didn't have that opportunity
Yeah.
to learn where they have no choice. It's just one of their reading, writing, arithmetic, and English
Right.
from very early age. So it's just second nature to them.
Well, I remember, yeah, when you guys moved to Germany, my mom took German like etiquette lessons because, you can't go and impose your American cultural ideals into, another culture. And I remember that was really important to her. I know you were learning the language because you took German like in high
Yeah.
school or college or something like that. And so I know she didn't speak German, but she took the etiquette lessons to be able to, be in the culture and not be, the ugly American, as you say. And also too, just real quick caveat, students that are on, if you guys have questions or want to make any comments, please, this should be an interactive call. You can put them in the chat pod, or please feel free to come off of mute and ask Steve anything. He has a wealth of information and knowledge and experience. So please make this as interactive as you guys would like it to
Yeah,
be.
please.
Yeah. And it makes it more fun
Yeah.
instead of just him and I talking. Cause like I said, this is my dad. I talk to him all the time. So, but yeah, I had a lot of respect for my mom for taking that initiative. I know initially, which is kind of cool, like initially you guys were supposed to do like 11 countries in the 2 years that you guys were going to be. And I'm not sure how that would have looked as far as preparing for all of those different cultures. But because of whatever restructuring or economy, you guys ended up just in Germany for 1 full year. And I do, like I said, I still remember visiting you guys there. God, that was like 20 years ago. And I visited you and just, my mom, as we would, just walk around or experience, the country and the city, because you had lived in Cologne, and how she would just, kind of always whisper in my ear, like, okay, this is normal, or, you need to do this, or you need to, be comfortable with that. Because I remember the biggest thing for me was the personal space. You know,
Right.
us Americans are like 6 feet of personal space for people we don't know, where other cultures aren't like that. So that was a huge adjustment for me. And I was only there like a week or something.
Yeah, and that's key because that's you just can't assume everybody does things the way we do those.
Mhm.
And think about it, even within the United States, you've got different regions and there's different cultures, different vernacular, things that are different within the country, but we seem to just go with the flow. We just know that if you're in the South, they talk a little slower, they're a lot more chill than those up in the Northeast, and you just kind of go with it. But then when you go to a foreign country, you're it's harder for Americans to embrace that. When they first start traveling. After a while, you just start to understand how to make that adjustment. But early on, you're a little put off because they're doing things differently than you do, and that's just the way cultures are, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things, just as a kind of a few key tips on preparing to travel internationally to do business, and even personal travel is just as important. But in business, there's a steeper price to pay if you fail. You may just not have a very good vacation if you don't have that good experience. But in business, you don't close the deal. Those sort of things that can happen, and you don't even realize that you may be insulting someone, particularly in the East Asian countries.
Mhm.
There's some very kind of strict protocols that it's hard to understand, but if you cross the line, you've done some damage, and it may be tough to recover from that. So a couple things to consider, and really, if anybody has any questions, please uh, pipe in. But first off, do a little research. It's so easy to Google and just find what's going on in the country. What's the local language? What's the local currency? How prevalent are credit cards accepted? Do you have to get the local currency? I mean, frankly, I haven't carried local currency internationally in over 15 years. I mean, I used to always exchange money and then I had to exchange it back. And, unless I was traveling to that country multiple times, I would just keep that money and use it for my next trip. But for the most part, but it's not universal, that you can use your credit cards. Be aware of foreign transaction fees on your credit cards. They'll be 3% unless they're specifically stated that no foreign transaction fees. But that can really surprise you. But again, don't assume that everybody's going to take credit cards. So just do a little research there. Learn a few local phrases in the local language, such as, greetings, hello, goodbye, please, thank you, and importantly, directions. You get in a cab to go to your hotel, and if you can't explain where you're going, and again, a lot of them speak English, but I've been in many cabs that the cab drivers simply don't speak English. And so Google Translate is your best friend, because it'll really help you. But you don't want to assume, and then again, feel entitled that everybody's going to cater to your needs when you're in their country.
Right. Dad,
Um,
Dad, we got a question here
Go
real
ahead.
fast. Speaking of languages, what's the best way to pick up a new language in your opinion?
Uh, yeah, there are so many apps. Like right now, I'm using Duolingo, and I just practice it every day, just to kind of for my own personal benefit. Um, the best way to do it is to immersion, being in the culture, kind of forced. So it's sink or swim, and not everybody has that opportunity. They're going for brief stints. So any one of the language apps will give you an opportunity. There's multiple ways, multiple paths, learning paths in these apps that you can, find a path that works for you for whatever you're trying to accomplish, which is, as I was just saying, local common phrases,
Mhm.
just being able to greet somebody in their language. They'll always appreciate it. Yeah, hands down, they will always recognize the effort that you went to because they know Americans aren't typically bilingual. and in Europe, they're multilingual. So, but they really appreciate that you took that effort. So I wish I had a more specific answer for you, but everybody learns differently. Some are visual, some are tactile, and immersion is really the best way to do it. But we don't always have that opportunity.
All right.
So I've tried Babbel, I've tried Duolingo, and both of them are good apps to to get yourself at least get started.
All right, thank you. And good question, Allery. I myself was using Duolingo. Actually, my son and I were trying to learn Spanish together because that makes the most sense, especially where we live. Although he came to me last night asking if I wanted to learn Japanese with him, and I was like, no. That's a hard no, because that I can't even hear half the sounds, I think I'm too old to try to learn that language, but that's a really great question, Allery. So Steve, I do have a question. I know you said that they appreciate, you trying to speak in their language. What about like accents or getting the words wrong? I mean, do you find that that is annoying to them, or are they really truly just appreciative that you're making the effort?
I can tell you across the board that people are not at all offended or look down on you. The fact that you pronounced a word wrong or you're doing it in an American accent, absolutely not. However, I will tell you that my entire time in Germany, every time I went up to a German and asked them something in German, they answered me in English every time. So either I was butchering their language and they couldn't take it, or they recognized the accent and
Trying to
and
help
then
you out.
I'd always ask them, did I say it wrong? They said, no, we just want to practice our English. So they were being, I think, polite, but but no, I've never come across any situation where anybody wasn't anything other than fully appreciative that you took the time and the effort to learn a few phrases.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, because I only know a few in Spanish and I think I would butcher it, but that's good to know. We have another question. Ty asks, what's the biggest difference in domestic business versus international business?
Well, it really depends. That's a great question. So it really depends on the region that you're in. So even within Europe, so if you're in Spain, everything is very laid back. Nobody's in a hurry. You don't just rush right into things when you're having meetings, when you're talking to them. They just will take their time. Nobody, they're not going to operate on your schedule. If you think if you can put the best project plan together, and use that same project plan around the globe, and not to pick on the Spaniards, but that's just a good example where their time, their concept of time, I suppose, is different than Americans. And so what you think should take a week may take 3 weeks. When you need approvals up the chain, that could take, far longer than we would expect it to take. We'd expect to be able to submit it to our boss, get an answer the next day. Mm-hmm. Here it could, in Spain, it could take weeks. In East Asia, in China, Japan, Korea, I did some work in Cambodia. They are almost insulted when, as an American, you come in and you say hello and you start your meeting. You turn on your overhead projector and you just jump right into the meeting. They are really put off by that. They want to kind of ease into it. They want to talk, learn something about you. And if you don't understand that, you just don't understand. Like, you start reading the audience and it's like they're totally disengaged. Mm-hmm. But it's because they just think, what is this guy doing? And we didn't even get to find out, what's his favorite meal or how many kids he has. It's just a different culture. But if you understand those things, you're going to be far more successful. And there's again, there's so many resources out there to help you kind of understand the business etiquette around the globe. And it's not a one size fits all.
Mhm.
And even one size doesn't fit all within the United States. If you're in California as opposed to New York, those people operate differently, but it's not quite as extreme as say in the East Asian countries. I mean, they're very professional, they're very polite, but they just have a different way of doing things. And they think Americans are in way too much of a hurry. And they want to just take time and get to know you because they're going to do business with you, maybe. And
Maybe.
so they want to get to know you before you just jump into your spiel and try to tell them what you're going to do. They want to know, do I even want to do this with you? And so that's a real key learning, that you cannot assume that everybody's going to embrace your style, around the globe. And again, there's lots of resources out there to help you figure out, what are things to do, more importantly, what to avoid. And I'll give you a real simple example. In Singapore, I was in a meeting and they come up and they introduce themselves and they hand you a business card and they hold it in two hands and they hand it to you. 9 out of 10 times an American is going to just take it, stick it in their pocket. Mm-hmm. That's very offensive to them. The appropriate approach is you take that credit or that business card in two hands and then you look at it, you read it, you thank them for it, and then you put it away.
Okay.
Because that says, I've been seen, you're not just, I didn't just waste my time giving you my business card. That's really important to him. Okay. When I remember checking out of a hotel in Kuala Lumpur, and there was a number of Americans in front of me, and the people behind the desk would check them out. They'd carefully fold up their invoice, put it in an envelope. They'd come around the counter and hand it to them, holding it in two hands. Okay. Every American ahead of me just took it, stuffed it in their briefcase, and left. Again, the appropriate thing is you take it with two hands, just the way they handed it to you. You thank them, give a little nod with your head, not a full bow, but a nod with the head that you appreciate it, because they're showing you respect, that you've stayed at their establishment. They want to show you that, you're appreciated. And so you take the time to appreciate that appreciation. And it just goes a long way into dispelling the luckily American myth. And again, it's not that these Americans are doing anything malicious or intentionally mean. It's just that's how they do things at home.
Right.
They wouldn't dream of, particularly engaging with the checkout clerk at the hotel. But that culture, that's important for them to show that respect and honor. And so as a courtesy, you do the same.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I never would have thought about that. And great question, Ty. Thank you. But yeah, when I was in B&I, they talked about, when you exchange business cards. So it's kind of cool that you talked about that in the Asian cultures, like, sorry, let me back up. In B&I, which is Business Networking International. So it's for business owners to get together and be able to build their business by passing referrals to each other. So that's what the whole purpose of that organization is. It's like a chamber of commerce, kind of like on steroids almost. But we were talking about like when you go to networking events, and I tell my students all the time when they're going to networking events or career fairs or when they meet, ask for a business card. And then flip it over on the back, maybe write something about that person so that you can remember them, especially if you've collected several business cards in an event, write something real quick about that person so that you kind of can make that connection. Oh yeah, that was the person that, traveled, or that was the person that had a kid who played soccer or something. But in Asian cultures, writing on the business card is offensive.
Right.
And that was good to know, because it's like, I would never have known, I don't know to take it with two hands. I don't know to look at it and read it, because I would probably do the exact same thing. Like, thank you for your card, stick it in my purse and, move on, because, that's what we would do. So that's good to know. But I also like that you're talking about their pace And I can tell from very personal experience that my guest here likes to move quickly. He walks quickly, he moves quickly. But I know when we lived in New Zealand, even going out to lunch or dinner was a struggle because, you know, we're used to sitting down, being greeted immediately, getting our, you know, drinks, getting our food. You eat, you pay, you go. Especially if it's like during the workday and you're going out for lunch, you've got an hour. And us Americans, like we're rushing, you know, a lot of people just do fast food or drive through, but if you're going to go sit down, it's like you got an hour, you got to go and get back to work. Whereas I saw this in New Zealand. I also saw it a lot in Germany. There's people are like having libations at lunch, and it is
Right.
a 2 or 3 hour lunch. And that, you know, if you were to have an alcoholic drink during your lunch break in America, you would not have a job. You
Right.
would be
Exactly.
fired.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that was like, cause I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, they're like drinking wine, you know, at noon and it's a Tuesday and, you know, they're in business suits, but that's perfectly acceptable for that particular culture. So
Yep.
that was an adjustment for me as well. I,
Yeah. So, and to that,
I lost my light.
oh, and
It's a
to
bush
that
light.
point, people do things differently, and dining is a perfect example. Like you said, in America, you're used to, things being very quick. The server shows up right away. They get you the water. Water isn't a common thing served in outside of the U.S. Um, and then once you get your food, the server comes frequently. How are things doing? Well, in other countries, you're not going to see the server unless you flag them down. And I recall, and this is something to really consider, how they operate differently in different parts of the world. So I was working in Spain, and we worked all day long, and then they said, "We'll pick you up for dinner tonight." I said, "Oh, great. We'll be there at 9." So they're picking me up at 9, and we left the restaurant at midnight.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
it's just their normal thing. They eat late and they take a long time. It's an
Yeah.
event with them. Uh, and where, I'm used to eating maybe by 7, and by 7:30, time to go.
Right.
So those are things that you just be aware, and kind of prepare yourself for. And it's fun, but the whole time I'm thinking, God, when are we going to be done? And because then we're starting the workday, 8 o'clock the next morning, but and they're drinking wine and staying till midnight.
That's
So
bananas.
it's just a different, it's a
Yeah.
different pace.
That was, yeah,
Uh,
I think that was probably the biggest adjustment that I saw in my international travels as well, was just the, you know, the pace, you know, like you said, you know, we just seem to be in such a hurry, like what's the next thing? What's the next thing?
yeah,
Instead of being mindful and present in the moment and just enjoying the moment versus okay, it's almost like we're checking off these lists, you know. If when I go and travel, it's like, you know, we have these excursions, we have these things, it's like tick, 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 and then hurry up
yep,
and go instead of just like breathing and enjoying the moment.
exactly. So, so you made me think of something else when we're talking about dining outside the U.S. So tipping comes into play. So Americans, we're inundated with tipping, and it's just become so ubiquitous. Even for self-service, it's, do you want to add a tip? And it went from 15 to 18% to 20%, and now you're presented with 20 is the smallest tip, and they give you these suggestions. Tipping is radically different in other parts of the world. Some places it's absolutely frowned upon, other places it's not expected, but it's appreciated, but the percentages are much smaller.
Mhm.
And quite honestly, I have heard over and over again in other parts of the world, you Americans are ruining it for the rest of us, because you come over here and tip like you tip in America.
Mhm.
And these people aren't used to that. And then they start to expect that. So the easiest thing to do is, first thing when you land in a new country, just Google what are the tipping protocols and etiquettes in this country, because it's not a flat rate. expected rate across all services. A cab driver it may be appropriate to tip them one percentage. The hotel room service may be another, meals may be another, and if it's a fine dining as opposed to casual dining, those are different. So just don't assume, and don't you're not impressing anybody by tipping large. You're in some cases actually insulting them, depending on what part of the world. You're actually insulting them because it's you're saying, oh, you don't make enough money, I'm going to help you out. Like we're the great American savior. And it's a nuance that you're not even going to be aware of, but they're going to take that perception of you away with them, and then unfortunately it kind of colors their perception of all Americans.
All Americans, yeah.
So just don't assume anything, and just do a little research. It's very simple nowadays to pull that up. Another thing that's really important, particularly in East Asian countries, and this, my wife has reminded me on more than one occasion, you never ask a woman if she's pregnant unless she's in active labor. You never guess someone's ethnicity.
Okay.
So how many times somebody has said, oh, are you Chinese? Oh, are you Korean? That's very offensive to them, unless they are in fact Chinese or Korean. And even then, it's North Korea, South Korea. You ask them, maybe, if it's appropriate, you can ask them what their ethnicity is. Where do you come from? But you don't say, are you? Just like the people there in New Zealand were saying, are you Canadian? Because they knew that wasn't going to be offensive. But worst case, they just kind of guessed wrong. But over there, they have much more of an identity around their ethnicity, and to assume that they are from one region or country just because they have Asian features, that's highly offensive, and they're not going to say anything to you, but they're going to be offended.
Yeah.
So if it's important for you to know, ask, don't tell.
Okay. Well, that's that fact that you just brought that up reminded me of my time when I was in Ireland. Between South and North Ireland is completely different. I mean, even the metric system and the currency, and you wouldn't know because there's no really truly identifying features to say if you're North or Southern, Northern or Southern Ireland, but it's your accent. And I remember I spent a day in Belfast, and the driver was from Dublin. And then once we crossed over into Northern Ireland, like, he literally said he had to wear his jacket that had the company logo that let people know that he was working, because for him to go into Northern Ireland with his Southern Ireland accent, it was, they did not get along at all. And it was it was intense. And, and he had to wait for us to do the things that we were doing, while we were there. And even just going to a cafe to have lunch, he had to wear his logo jacket so that when people heard his accent, they knew that he was working, and he wasn't like basically like, I felt like it was like West Side Story, like he was on the wrong side of the next, with his accent. And it was interesting, and I learned a lot too, because it's like, wow, I didn't even that's just, they're on the same island. It's Ireland. How can it be so different? But that alone was a really eye-opening experience.
Yeah, and it's a good point. It reminds me of something else that for international travelers, power. So most of the world outside of North America is their power is 220 as opposed to the 110 that we have, and so your power cords are not going to fit. So be prepared and do a little research. What adapters, and from one country to another in Europe, they could be different. They may all be 220, and most appliances these days, computers, hair dryers, those sort of things are dual voltage, and so they will adapt where in the past you used to have a converter to step down that 220 to 110. But for the most part, everything is dual voltage nowadays. It's safe to check. It's prudent to check and just confirm that some of your smaller appliances that you're bringing that need power are in fact dual voltage. But it's the plug itself. And so do a little research, figure out what kind of plug you need. There's a number of different universal adapters that have different kinds of plugs all in one unit. But be prepared, because otherwise, you're not going to have any power. Now, it's possible that the hotels that you're staying at will have adapters that you can borrow. But do yourself a favor and check out what's required before you go, so that you're not stuck in a spot where you can't charge your phone, can't run your laptop.
That's good. Yeah, I think the overriding theme here I keep hearing you say is, do your research, do your research, do your research. And so that you can be prepared, because, you don't want to get over there, like you said, not have power or not have the right currency. But the worst, I think, is just that stuff you could buy if you had to, when you're over there. But the biggest thing I would like for students to take away from this is the cultural awareness, that basic multicultural diversity and respect and awareness, so that you're not offending anybody, because you're in their culture. You can't go over there and expect things to, like you said, always be in English, or people to drive on the right side of the road. I mean, that was a challenge, in New Zealand when they drove on the left side. I mean, just making sure that you're looking the right ways before you step off the curve,
Right.
little stuff like, I mean, you and I were driving in some country, out in the country where there wasn't actually the lines, and you're like, just naturally we're gravitating to the left, and it's like, stay right, or stay left,
Yeah.
and then coming back to the States, why are the cars on the wrong side of the road when they were actually, so that's really, that's fun. That's interesting. What else? I know we're kind of coming up on our time here, but, is there any, besides doing the research and trying to learn a couple phrases and stuff, what else kind of advice could you give for students who are either going to be looking to work internationally, or, just to travel for pleasure?
I think to appreciate the differences. And as I said kind of numerous times, if you're prepared with just going with a little bit of effort, it is so appreciated by them. You're not going to offend them even if on cultural things, if they know that you've tried and you just kind of zigged when you should have zagged. But when you're just completely oblivious and just, doing the bull in the china shop way that you might operate very successfully in the US, that's just not going to fly. You're not going to be successful in business, and you're not going to have an enjoyable pleasure vacation, if you behave that way. So appreciate the differences, embrace the culture, take away what you can, but just don't be that ugly American. It's the best advice that I can give. I guess that's it. So.
That's awesome. No, that's great. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, we've got a lot of good information here. And again, Steve has traveled business and pleasure everywhere. I can't think of, maybe Antarctica, maybe the only place
That's the only place I haven't been to Antarctica.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share this with our students. I really appreciate your effort and your thoughts and insights to this. You do have way more knowledge on this than anybody I know. So this was a great topic to share this with you. And students, if you have any questions, or if you wanted to ask more, please feel free to either share those with me and I can pass those along to him, and we can get your questions answered. But this was a great talk. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure. I appreciate you having me, and hope that hope the students were able to take something away that they can use in their as they embark out on the business world.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, everybody. So thank you for coming. This was a great talk. I'm going to post this video as well for anybody else that wanted to come back and look at it. But other than that, have a great day. Enjoy your Friday and have a great weekend.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.